24th February 1991. Republican Guard defensive line, southern Iraq. Conditions, visibility 0. Sandstorm. Absolute darkness. The air inside the turret of a T-72 M1 Lion of Babylon does not smell like war. It smells like ancient grease, unwashed fatigues, and the sharp metallic tang of diesel fumes trapped in a steel lung. For the crew of the Tawakalna Division, this claustrophobia is comforting. It is the smell of power. Outside, the Iraqi desert has been swallowed by a moonless night and a whipping shamal winds that have turned the horizon into a wall of abrasive grit. To the naked eye, the world ends at the tip of the 125mm smoothbore cannon. They believe they are invisible. This confidence is not accidental. It is engineered. For 40 years, the Soviet Union taught its client states a specific catechism of armored warfare: aggression, mass, and durability. The T-72 is the physical manifestation of this doctrine. It is a brawler, low-profile, autoloader-fed, and built to survive the harsh realities of a nuclear battlefield. The Iraqi commanders, trained in the prestigious academies of Moscow, look at the American M1A1 Abrams and see a Cadillac. They see a bloated, gas-guzzling curiosity filled with delicate microchips that will surely choke on the first grain of Arabian sand. The Americans are addicted to their air conditioning and their satellites. But satellites cannot see through a sandstorm. Airplanes cannot fly in this wind. Tonight, they must come down into the mud with us. And in the dark, the man with the most iron wins. This is the laugh. The arrogant Titan's dismissal of the unknown. The Iraqi defensive plan relies entirely on a concept of warfare that died 10 years prior. But they haven't received the obituary yet. Their strategy is anchored in the active infrared doctrine. Mounted next to the gun of every T-72 is the Luna searchlight. To the Soviet mind, night fighting is simple. You turn on the invisible spotlight, you illuminate the target, and you fire. The Soviet night vision relies on near-infrared. It is an active system. It requires the tank to project a beam of infrared light, essentially a massive invisible flashlight that bounces off the target and returns to the gunner's scope. It works on the principle of reflection. If there is no light, there is no image. It is a system built on the assumption that the enemy is blind. The commanders check their watches. The Americans are out there, somewhere in the void. But the Iraqi crews are calm. They know the terrain. They are dug in, hull down behind sand berms, their engine decks cool, their silhouettes masking into the dunes. They believe the darkness is a sanctuary. They believe that unless the Americans turn on their own headlights, the desert will remain a stalemate of blindness. They are wrong. They are operating on analog logic in a digital battle space. They do not realize that the weapon facing them does not see light. It sees heat. The darkness is not a shield. It is a high-contrast background. And every living thing, every running engine, every warm gun barrel is about to glow like a flare in a pitch-black room. The horizon is silent. The anomaly begins. Time, 3:45 hours. Status, radio silence. Optics TPN 14923, night sight. Image fidelity, grainy. Green. Static. The commander of the lead T-72 presses his face against the rubber eye cup of the TPN-1 night sight. The world outside is a murky soup of indistinguishable green shapes. The Soviet optics, state-of-the-art in the 1970s, are struggling against the physics of the Arabian weather. The sandstorm acts as a scattering lens, diffusing the faint ambient light of the stars until the image in the scope looks like television static. He is looking for the silhouettes he was trained to identify, the sharp angles of an M60, the towering profile of a chieftain, the flash of a muzzle brake. He strains his eyes, his pupils dilated to the limit, scanning the horizon line. There was nothing, just the howling wind and the shifting dunes. The desert is empty. Then, the physics of the battlefield invert. There is no warning. There is no distant thump of a cannon firing. There is no streak of light across the sky. One moment, the T-72 on his right flank, a 40-ton fortress of composite armor and reactive bricks, is sitting silently in the dark. The next moment, it ceases to be a tank. Crack! The sound arrives 2 seconds after the impact. The vehicle violently decompresses. The turret, weighing 12 tons, lifts vertically off the chassis on a pillar of white fire. The ammunition carousel, the infamous Soviet carousel of death located directly beneath the crew, has ignited. The explosion is not chemical, it is elemental. The tank does not just burn, it glows with the intensity of a small sun, instantly illuminating the surrounding dunes in a flickering, macabre orange strobe. Panic is immediate. It is electric.
Mine strike! Sector 2! We have hit a minefield! Reverse!
Reverse! The logic of the crew is sound, based on their understanding of warfare. A tank exploding without an incoming projectile trail usually means a mine, or perhaps an airstrike. It cannot be an enemy tank. The range is too great. The night is too dark. If there were an enemy tank, they would have seen the infrared spotlight. They would have seen the muzzle flash. But the logic is wrong. The projectile that killed the T-72 was a kinetic energy penetrator, a dart of depleted uranium moving at Mach 5. It moves faster than the speed of sound. The crack the crew heard was not the gun firing. It was the sonic boom of the dart passing their own tank just milliseconds before it impacted their wingman. The sound of the enemy gun firing is still traveling through the air, miles away, lost in the wind. Before the commander can grasp the radio, the second tank in the formation dies. Same method, same violence. A hole punches through the frontal slope, the thickest armor on the vehicle, as if it were wet cardboard. The spall liner fails. The crew is vaporized instantly by a spray of molten metal and overpressure. Now the arrogant Titan breaks. The formation dissolves into chaos. The discipline of the Republican Guard, forged in the 8-year war with Iran, shatters under the weight of the inexplicable. They are fighting a ghost. Desperation takes over. The Iraqi commanders resort to the only tool they have left. They flip the switches for the Luna infrared searchlights. This is the fatal error. This is the moment the prey signals the predator. Action: Luna L2G searchlight on. Output: 800 meters of invisible light. Result: suicide. To the naked eye, the desert remains pitch black. The infrared beams are invisible to humans. The Iraqi gunners frantically sweep their turrets, the heavy electric motors whining, pushing these beams of dark light across the dunes, searching for a reflection, a glint, anything to shoot at. They are screaming into the radio, demanding targets. They are firing blindly at shadows, their 125mm cannons roaring, kicking up massive dust clouds that further blind their own optics. They believe the searchlight is helping. They believe they are hunting. I see nothing. I see nothing. Where is the fire coming from? Allah, they are everywhere. They do not realize that to the Americans, sitting comfortably 3 kilometers away, the Iraqi tanks have just turned on massive beacons. In the American thermal sights, the Luna searchlight doesn't just look like a light, it looks like a supernova. It washes out the subtle thermal signature of the tank and replaces it with a hard, distinct kill box. The Iraqis are not just blind, they are actively painting targets on their own foreheads. The Soviet active IR system works on the flashlight principle. It illuminates the dark. But the American system works on the emission principle. It detects heat radiation. The active IR light generates heat. The tank engine generates heat. The gun barrel, now hot from panic firing, generates heat. The Iraqi tanks are increasing their thermal contrast with every second of panic. The slaughter becomes rhythmic. Clinical. It is not a battle. It is an industrial process. Target. Lays. Fire. Correction. Target. Lays. Fire. Inside the remaining T-72s, the sensory experience is pure horror. They are trapped in a steel box, deafened by their own engines, blinded by the sandstorm, waiting for the inevitable crack that signals their end. They spin their turrets left, then right. They fire HE frag rounds at the horizon, hoping to suppress the Phantom. But the Phantom does not flinch. The Phantom does not move. The Phantom just keeps killing. The radio network descends into a cacophony of screams and static. One by one, the call signs go silent. The company commander, the man who laughed at the delicate American technology, watches his platoon burn. He realizes, in the final seconds before his own hull is breached, that his tank is not a weapon. It is a tomb. The heavy armor, the low profile, the 125mm gun, none of it matters. He is fighting a war of geometry, and he is on the wrong side of the equation. Distance to target unknown. Enemy visibility 0%. Casualty rate 100%. The silence returns. Location: Hughes Aircraft Laboratory, California, 1982. And M1A1 turret, 1991. System AN-VS2 thermal imaging system. Operating temp -321 Fahrenheit. Wavement 8 to 14 microns. To understand why the Iraqi army died in the dark, we must leave the burning sands of the 73 Easting and retreat to a sterile, dust-free laboratory in Southern California. While the Soviet Union was building thousands of tanks with thicker armor and bigger guns, American engineers were staring at a chalkboard, obsessing over a fundamental law of the universe, Planck's law of black body radiation. The Soviet doctrine was built on image intensification. This is the technology of the Viet Cong and the Cold War spy thriller, those grainy green tubes that amplify existing light. It is an analog technology. It relies on the stars or the moon. If you put a blanket over the sun, the image intensifier goes blind. To compensate, the Soviets added the active IR searchlight, the Luna, essentially bolting a massive flashlight to the turret. It was a brute force solution to a delicate physics problem. It assumed that the only way to see was to reflect light off an object. The Americans ignored the light. They hunted the heat. The American engineers realized that darkness is a lie. Darkness is merely the absence of visible light. But the universe is screaming in other frequencies. Every object in the universe with a temperature above absolute zero emits thermal radiation. A rock, a tree, a human body, a steel tank track. They are all glowing. The hotter they are, the brighter they shine. The challenge was not amplification, as the Soviets believed. The challenge was translation. How do you take the invisible heat signature of a T-72 engine block, which exists in the far infrared spectrum, and convert it into a visual image that a human gunner can understand? Enter the mercury-cadmium telluride detector. This is the heart of the M1A1's magic. It is a semiconductor material exotic enough to detect the minute energy difference of a single photon of heat. But there is a catch. The sensor itself creates heat. If you simply turn it on, the sensor's own temperature blinds it. It's like trying to hear a whisper while screaming at the top of your lungs. To work, the eye of the tank must be dead. It must be cold, cryogenically cold. Sound the high-pitched whine of the Joule-Thomson cooler. Status detector cooled. Temp 77 Kelvin. Inside the turret of the M1A1 Abrams, before the battle begins, the gunner hears a distinct sound. It is not the roar of the turbine engine. It is the rhythmic, high-pitched whir of the cooling unit. This pump is forcing gas into a vacuum, dropping the temperature of the thermal sensor array to minus 321 degrees Fahrenheit. This is the technological chasm. The Iraqi T-72 is a mechanical beast of gears and oil. The M1A1 is a mobile physics laboratory carrying a cryogenically cooled quantum detector. Once the sensor hits that critical temperature, the world transforms. The darkness vanishes completely. It doesn't look like reality, it looks like a negative. The ground is cold, so it's black. The sky is cold, so it's black. But the enemy? They are white hot. They look like ghosts glowing in a void. You can see the heat rising off their exhaust vents. You can see the friction heat on their road wheels. You can't hide from it. If you are alive, you glow. This is where the investigation phase of the battle exposes the fatal flaw in the Soviet worldview. The Iraqi commanders believed the sandstorm was their ally. They knew that visible light, and by extension their laser rangefinders and optical sights, is easily blocked by airborne particles. A grain of sand is roughly the same size as a wavelength of visible light. When light hits the sand, it scatters. This is why you cannot see through a storm with your eyes. But the American wizard, the engineer in the lab, calculated the wavelengths. Thermal energy travels in much longer wavelengths than visible light, 10 microns versus 0.5 microns. This is the key. Because the thermal wave is larger than the dust particle, it does not bounce off. It flows around it. It passes through the sandstorm as if it isn't there. This is known as the transmission window. To the Iraqi gunner peering through his glass optics, the sandstorm is a wall of opaque brown grit. To the American gunner looking through the thermal imaging system, the sandstorm is transparent. It is invisible. The American gunner can see the heat signature of the T-72 clearly, crisp and bright, sitting 5 kilometers away through a wall of dust that should make vision impossible. The TIS converts that heat data into a digital video signal. It draws a box around the target. This brings us to the second part of the American reveal, the digital ballistic computer. The Soviet T-72 relies on a stadiometric rangefinder, or a rudimentary laser. It requires manual calculation. The gunner estimates the range, turns a crank to elevate the gun, and fires. It is a system that relies on human skill and estimation. Under stress, human estimation fails. The M1A1 removes the human from the math. Inputs: wind sensor, cant sensor, ammo temp, barrel droop, laser return 2400 meters. Calculation time: 0.1 seconds. The Abrams is not just seeing the enemy, it is solving a geometry problem in real time. The fire control computer is a primitive but ruthless digital brain. It samples the crosswind, which pushes the shell sideways. It samples the temperature of the gunpowder, which changes the burn rate. It senses the cant of the tank if the tank is on a hill. It even measures the droop of the gun barrel caused by the heat of the sun. It takes these dozens of variables the Soviet doctrine ignores or leaves to the panicked crew, and adjusts the gun automatically. The gunner does not aim above the target to compensate for gravity. He puts the reticle directly on the glowing white box in the center of the thermal image. He laces, the computer moves the gun. The reticle snaps back to the target. The system does not guess, it solves. This is the reveal that the Iraqi army never understood. They thought they were fighting men. They thought that if they could scare the Americans or blind them with smoke or hide in the dark, the American aim would waver. Men shake. Men panic. Men miss. But the thermal imaging system has no adrenaline. The ballistic computer has no fear. It is a cold, indifferent loop of sensors and processors. It sees a heat source, it calculates the trajectory, and it sends a signal to the main gun. The Soviet engineers who designed the T-72 assumed that quantity has a quality all its own. They believed that if you built 10,000 tanks, you could overwhelm the enemy. They did not account for the fact that a single tank with a thermal sight can engage a target that doesn't even know it's being watched. We were doing things that shouldn't be possible. We were engaging targets through oil smoke, through sand, at ranges where the enemy couldn't even see us with binoculars in broad daylight. It wasn't a fight, it was a harvest. The technological chasm is now fully exposed. On one side, you have the analog warrior, relying on eyes, searchlights, and courage, sitting in a cold steel box, blind and deaf in the storm. On the other side, you have the digital predator, relying on cryogenics, microchips, and physics, sitting in a silent, air-conditioned turret, watching the enemy on a TV screen like a video game. The result is not a battle. It is a foreclosure on the Soviet doctrine of warfare. The mystery of the Phantom Brigade is solved. There is no phantom. There is only a machine that has mastered the electromagnetic spectrum. The Iraqi crews are waiting for the Americans to turn on their lights. They are waiting for the dawn. But the M1A1 has brought the sun with it, trapped inside a vacuum-sealed tube, focused entirely on them. The equation is set. Now, the execution begins. Time, 4:15 hours. Range, 1,800 meters. Closing to 1,000 meters. Ammunition, M829A1 APF SDST, silver bullet. Material, depleted uranium U-238. The battlefield at 73 Easting has now transformed into a surreal, one-sided abattoir. The incident has passed. The confrontation is fully engaged. But confrontation implies a duality, a struggle between two opposing forces. What is happening here is not a struggle. It is an administrative deletion. Inside the lead M1A1 Abrams, the atmosphere is shockingly domestic. The violent roar of the outside world is muffled by inches of Jabum armor and the noise-canceling headsets of the crew. They communicate in a flat, bored monotone, the tanker drawl. This is the voice of men who are not fighting for their lives, but simply operating machinery. Gunner, coax, troops in the open. Identified. Fire. On the way. To the right of the gunner, the loader, a 19-year-old human servo mechanism, performs the most violent dance in the military world. He hits the knee switch to open the blast door. The armored bulkhead slides away, revealing the honeycomb of the ready rack. He grabs the aft cap of a 120mm round, pulls it from the tube, and pivots. The round weighs 40 pounds. He flips it, rams it into the breech with a closed fist, and throws the safety lever up. Slam! Action up. Time elapsed 4 seconds. The loader screams, "Up!" The gunner does not hesitate. He does not need to check the wind. He does not need to check the range. The computer has already updated the firing solution 3 times in the last second. He squeezes the triggers on the Cadillacs, the dual hand grips that control the turret. The physics of the M829A1 silver bullet are terrifying. The projectile is a sabot, a dart wrapped in a lightweight shoe. When it leaves the barrel, the sabot peels away, leaving a long, thin rod of depleted uranium flying at 1,600 meters per second. This is Mach 5. At this speed, materials stop behaving like solids and start behaving like fluids. Depleted uranium is the densest metal practical for warfare. It is 1.7 times denser than lead. But its true horror lies in its self-sharpening property. When a tungsten rod hits armor, it mushrooms, becoming blunt. When uranium hits armor, it shears. It stays sharp, eroding its way through the steel like a hot knife through butter. It does not smash the door down. It flows through the keyhole. The Iraqi T-72, sitting in the dark, never hears the shot. The dart crosses the 2-kilometer gap in just over 1 second. The impact is silent to the outside world, masked by the wind. But inside the T-72, the laws of physics are being violated. The uranium penetrator strikes the glacis plate. The Soviet composite armor, designed to stop chemical energy warheads, offers zero resistance to this much kinetic energy. The dart liquefies the steel upon contact. It enters the crew compartment. This is the pyrophoric effect. As the depleted uranium tears through the armor, the friction creates immense heat. Uranium is pyrophoric. It ignites when exposed to air at high temperatures. The dart essentially becomes a spray of burning aerosolized metal. It does not just kill the crew with shrapnel. It sprays the interior of the tank with a mist of fire that burns at 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Everything inside the turret, uniforms, hydraulic fluid, maps, skin, ignites instantly. The overpressure from the entry hole ruptures the eardrums and lungs of anyone who survived the initial spray. Target status: catastrophic. Kill. Secondary effect: the jack-in-the-box. This brings us to the fatal flaw of the Soviet design philosophy, the autoloader. To make the T-72 small and low profile, Soviet engineers removed the human loader and placed the ammunition in a mechanized carousel on the floor of the tank, directly beneath the commander and gunner. They are literally sitting on a throne of high explosives. When the silver bullet sprays its pyrophoric mist into the cabin, it finds the propellant charges in the carousel. The result is instant and absolute. The ammunition cooks off. The pressure inside the hull spikes to thousands of atmospheres in a millisecond. The path of least resistance is not through the thick hull, but upwards through the turret ring. The 12-ton turret is popped off the chassis like a champagne cork. It spins in the air, trailing a streamer of fire before crashing upside down into the sand. The hull remains, a headless, burning torch. This is not war. This is physics punishing bad engineering. Target destroyed. Cease fire. Scan right. I have heat signatures moving in the wadi. 3 targets. T-72s. The Iraqi response is frantic, blinded chaos. The surviving tanks in the formation see their comrades exploding. They see the pillars of fire. But they still cannot see the Americans. The sandstorm is still raging. The night is still black. The Iraqi gunners are weeping with frustration. They fire wildly at the muzzle flashes of the American tanks. But here, the technological chasm widens again. The Americans are using flashless propellant. The M1A1's muzzle flash is a dull, brief, reddish glow that is instantly swallowed by the dust. It does not blind the thermal sight. It does not give away the position. The Iraqis are firing at ghosts. Their shells fly high or bury themselves in the berms, harmlessly detonating kilometers away from the American line. It is a shooting gallery. The American line begins to move forward. The hunter-killer logic takes over. The M1A1 has a separate sight for the commander. While the gunner is killing target A, the commander is already scanning for target B. He presses a button, designate, and the turret automatically slews to the next victim. Slew, lock, lays. Fire, kill, slew, lock, lays. Fire, kill. The rhythm is hypnotic. The crews fall into a trance of destruction. They are not thinking about the men burning inside the steel coffins. They are thinking about the reticle, the coincidence, and the dump. They are playing a video game where the high score is measured in burning iron. Iraqi comms net. Brigade Commander, where are they? We are dying! We cannot see. Hold your positions. Fight! Fight! There is nothing to fight. They are devils. They are shooting through the earth. The panic in the Iraqi radio traffic is the sound of a world view collapsing. They were told they had the best tanks in the region. They were told they had the mass. But mass means nothing when you cannot acquire a target. In the confusion, an Iraqi T-72 commander spots a thermal bloom, a hotspot in the distance. He screams at his gunner. They traverse the turret. They fire a 125mm HE round. The round actually hits. It strikes the front turret cheek of an M1A1. This is the moment of truth for the Chobham armor. The Soviet round impacts, but it does not penetrate. The Chobham armor is a matrix of ceramic tiles encased in steel and depleted uranium mesh. It is designed to shatter the energy of an incoming round, dispersing the shock wave laterally. The 125mm shell detonates on the face of the Abrams. The explosion is massive. It strips the paint. It breaks the external storage box. It shakes the crew. Inside the Abrams, the crew flinches. The clang is deafening. "We're hit!" "We're hit!" The commander checks the diagnostics. The fire control is green. The engine is green. The hydraulics are green. He looks at the internal armor face. No spalling, no hole, just a smudge. "Driver, back up 10 feet. "Gunner, reorient. That bastard just scratched my paint. Kill him." The Abrams does not burn. It does not explode. It simply shakes off the hit and returns fire. The T-72 that fired the shot is destroyed 4 seconds later. This is the final psychological blow. To the Iraqis, the American tanks are not just invisible, they are immortal. They are monsters that can walk through fire, see through the dark, and kill with a single touch. The Iraqi line begins to rout. Crews abandon their fully functional tanks, preferring to take their chances on foot in the desert rather than remain in the target-rich environment of a warm engine block. They scramble out of the hatches, diving into the sand, but the thermal god sees them too. Thermal sight image small white dots scattering from the burning hulls. The infantry. The coaxial machine gun, a 7.62mm weapon mounted next to the main gun, begins to chatter. The thermal sight picks up the body heat of the fleeing tankers. They are glowing white against the cold, black sand. There is no hiding. There is no cover. The technological chasm does not offer mercy. It only offers precision. As the sun begins to hint at the horizon, the scale of the destruction becomes visible to the naked eye. The desert floor is littered with the burning carcasses of the Republican Guard. It is a graveyard of Soviet engineering. The turrets are planted in the sand like tombstones. The M1A1s roll past the wreckage, their turbines whining, their barrels seeking fresh targets. They do not stop to inspect their handiwork. They are machines of momentum. The unfair fight is over. The Iraqi commander, now huddling in a trench, watches the silhouette of an Abrams pass him. He sees the boxy, angular turret. He sees the massive thermal sight housing, looking like a cyclops eye. He realizes that his training, his doctrine, and his bravery were meaningless. He was bringing a knife to a nuclear gunfight. He realizes that the era of the Iron Fist is dead. The era of the Silicon Eye has arrived, and he is its first victim. 28th February, 1991. Time 0600 hours. Visibility clear. Landscape a corridor of smoke. As the sun rises over the Iraqi desert, the green world of the thermal sights finally fades. The American gunners switch their optics from thermal to day. The monochromatic digital battlefield is replaced by the harsh technicolor reality of morning. What they see confirms the death of an empire. Stretching from the horizon to the foreground is a highway of twisted metal. The Lion of Babylon, the pride of the Soviet export market, has been reduced to scrap. Hundreds of T-72s sit motionless, their turrets blown off, their hulls blackened by the intense heat of the uranium fires. They are not positioned in battle formations. They are scattered in panic, their guns pointing in random directions, testifying to the confusion of their final moments. The math is absolute. The statistics that emerge from this 100-hour war are so lopsided they sound like propaganda. over 3,000 Iraqi tanks were destroyed or captured. The number of M1A1 Abrams tanks destroyed by Iraqi tank fire? 0. It is a zero exchange ratio. In the history of warfare, from the Roman legions to the Blitzkrieg, such a disparity is statistically impossible. Even in a rout, the losing side usually inflicts some damage, a lucky shot, a mistake by the victor. But here, luck was removed from the equation. The American engineers had rigged the casino. By controlling the electromagnetic spectrum, by owning the night through thermal physics, they ensured that the enemy never even got to roll the dice. We didn't just defeat the enemy army. We deleted their entire concept of how to fight. They woke up in 1945, and we were fighting in 2020. The verdict is grim and inescapable. The Soviet doctrine of mass is dead. For 40 years, the Warsaw Pact believed that if they flooded the Fulda Gap with 50,000 tanks, the sheer weight of steel would crush the fragile Western technology. They believed that quantity had a quality all its own. Desert Storm proved that quantity is irrelevant if it is blind. 1,000 blind men are not a threat to one man with a night vision scope. They are simply a larger target. The T-72 was designed for a war that no longer exists. Its low profile was meant to hide it from human eyes, but it could not hide from thermal sensors. Its thick frontal armor was meant to stop steel shells, but it could not stop depleted uranium. Its active infrared searchlights were meant to illuminate the dark, but they only served to announce their own death. The lesson of the T-72 is a lesson in technological debt. The Soviets optimized for the wrong variable. They optimized for hard power, armor, caliber, speed. The Americans optimized for soft power, sensors, processing, data. In the end, the soft power directed the hard power with such efficiency that the Soviet armor became a liability, not an asset. In the aftermath, Russian generals stared at the reports in horror. Their client state, armed with their best export technology, had been vaporized in 4 days. The market for Soviet armor collapsed overnight. The T-72, once the boogeyman of NATO, was now seen for what it truly was: a blind giant, stumbling in the dark, waiting to be put down. The battlefield has gone silent again. The wind blows the black smoke of the oil fires across the dunes. The M1A1 crews pop their hatches and breathe in the morning air. They are alive not because they were braver or stronger or more numerous. They are alive because they brought a physicist to a knife fight. Final status: Soviet doctrine obsolete. Thermal supremacy confirmed. The chasm unbridgeable. They built a wall of steel to stop us. They never realized we would just see through it. Innovation doesn't just win wars, it ends eras. Subscribe for more stories from the chasm.